Hello and welcome to this conference hosted by MS Focus, the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. I'm your host, Casey Minnis. I'm Director of Communications for MS Focus, and I'm joined by Zachary White, Ph.D., and Donna Thomson, who will be presenting When Caregiving Meets Love, Rethinking Personal and Family Support. After a presentation from our speakers, we'll open it up to your questions and comments. If you do have questions and comments during the presentation, please use the chat feature to ask those questions. Now I'm delighted to introduce our speakers to you. Zachary White, PhD, is an associate professor in the James L. Knight School of Communication at Queen's University of Charlotte. His research and teaching focuses on helping people manage meaning and communicate life experiences amidst high levels of uncertainty and stress. His research has explored a variety of care experiences, including chronic caregiver experiences and end-of-life caregiving. He teaches a variety of undergraduate and graduate courses addressing topics such as patient-provider communication, caregiver communication, the patient experience, health and illness narratives, and digital health literacy. Zachary is the co-author with our other guest tonight, Donna Thomson, of The Unexpected Journey of Caring, the transformation from loved one to caregiver. And he's the founder of the blog for caregivers called The Unprepared Caregiver. Donna Thomson is a caregiver, author, and activist. She's the mother of two grown children, one who has severe cerebral palsy and medical complexity. Donna also helped care for her mother, who lived with dementia until she passed away in the summer of 2018 at the age of 96. In addition to the book that Donna co-authored with Zachary, she's also the author of The Four Walls of My Freedom, Lessons I've Learned from a Life of Caregiving. She blogs regularly at The Caregiver's Living Room and is a leader and instructor in family engagement and health research. She's a co-designer and co-instructor of the Family Engagement and Research course and the facilitator of the Caregiving Essentials course, both at McMaster University. Donna also teaches families how to advocate for care at the Advocacy School and at huddle.com. We're very pleased to have them join us now during National Family Caregivers Month to present this important topic. Zachary, thank you for being with us. Thank you, Donna, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Casey. And I want to say that Donna and I are pleased to be with you tonight and to talk to and about the caregiving experience. And we want to start off our discussion, and we really do hope it is a discussion. If you feel comfortable in the chat throughout to informally ask questions, and Donna and I will respond and engage throughout our presentation as well as at the end. But Donna, as we kind of greet people tonight, we start from the premise that you are the experts in MS. You are the experts in your own particular care. And so please interpret what Donna and I have to share tonight just as ways of thinking about your experiences that we have gleaned from our own personal experiences, but also through research and countless interviews with people just like you. Good evening, Donna. How are you this evening?
Thank you so much. Thanks, Casey, and hi, Zachary. Hi, everybody. I was saying just before we got going to Casey as well that what we've also tried to think about in terms of preparing for this evening, we tried to think about what we normally present to caregivers, but taking into account the pandemic. So what is possible today, and what could we be thinking about, and how could we be framing our needs with a COVID lens? So that's the kind of conversation we're going to be wanting to have too. Very practical, very rooted in today's realities.
No doubt, Donna, and all of us are impacted in a variety of ways, but we know that caregivers in particular, and our networks and the ways in which we provide personal and family support for ourselves and our loved ones are clearly impacted. And what we're going to talk about tonight is drawn in large part from our book, as Casey mentioned, and really focusing on this idea of the transformation from loved one to caregiver. And, you may be listening here we may be in different parts of our care experiences. Some may be very new, some may be in the middle of their experiences and maybe years into the process. And so please, use your own personal experiences as a way of making sense of what we're talking about, because we know that transformation means something different depending on where we are and what are the particular factors in our lives at this moment. We do know this, that caregiving and caring in particular for a loved one, and that's what really separates us from professional caregivers, extremely important and valuable. But when you care for a loved one, it changes who and what we care about and whom we do and don't find satisfying support from. We know across the research and from part of our own personal experiences that social support from others, perceived support is so vital in the way we feel and the way we think. And as Donna is going to talk about, the way we advocate for ourselves and our loved ones to do the most basic things to the most important things for us. And so as you think about this, Donna, I mean, it's kind of strange that we start with this idea of what may be some limitations of our family and friends. When we're not speaking to caregivers in particular, this really doesn't make any sense, but we're kind of walking in taboo territory here, Donna, because we're talking about why the people that you most counted on, maybe pre-caregiving or even early in your caregiving experiences, may not provide the kinds of support, in large part, Donna, because their tolerance for the kinds of experiences that caregivers go through is remarkably different than we anticipated.
Mm-hmm. And I think, what caregivers know about staying with and promising to walk together through someone's illness, is this idea of turning towards suffering together, not turning away from it. And many people turn away from suffering because they can't tolerate it. And they don't know what to do with the discomfort of that space. So,
No doubt.
yeah, and it's very, very disappointing when it happens in families.
Perhaps
People
is
you
the most
counted on.
disappointing, right? I mean, your expectations of what you think are met with the reality of what is or is not happening. And so maybe as for those of us here gathered tonight, just kind of do a little checklist in your mind, whether you feel that your friends and family, have lower levels of tolerance. Like how much are they willing to put up with the uncertainty that comes, Donna, with a chronic illness that doesn't respond to our wills and our desires. But most other people, you can clear a room if there's high levels of uncertainty about what's going to happen this next hour, let alone the next week.
Yeah, we really like things that are very fixable and very easily cured. Chronic disease, especially progressive disease, is unknown. The future is unknown. And that is what makes the situation so uncertain for people. And either they're prepared to accept that uncertainty, which family caregivers are forced to accept uncertainty, but others have a choice. And if it's too uncomfortable, people often will just disappear.
Great point, to the extent that it's a privilege for others to have high or low tolerance. For caregivers, it is a requirement of their caregiving and their love for the person that they are caring for. Mm-hmm. And others like to believe that that they are kind of independent, free agents, and they dream in eyes. And caregivers dream in very different ways, and their realities are bound up and grounded in a relational experience. Because for non-professional caregivers, when the title of our presentation, When Care or When Caregiving Meets Love, that's us. We didn't begin our relationships with this idea necessarily, but because we love the person we're caring for, we realize this interdependence, Donna, in ways that others have a hard time conceiving.
Yeah, that's true because of course, when we were caregivers, we had a different relationship before care needs appeared. And that pre-existing relationship doesn't disappear. We're a caregiver and a spouse, a caregiver and a mother or a daughter. Um, and that pre-existing relationship doesn't go anywhere. So it will change, obviously,
Yeah.
but that interdependence um, will always be there. And I think even when people lose a lot of function, um, there still is a kind of interdependence that we experience in caring for someone who um, has lost a lot of functional ability, but still is able to offer us comfort and us joy because they know us so well.
It's the language of we. It's almost foreign for us to believe that there is a language of I when we're talking about the kinds of intimate relationships that we experience as caregivers. Um, think about this: if you, in the course of an hour, let alone a day, if you experience both tears and the kinds of joy that Donna was hinting at, and someone asks you the question, how was your day, and you kind of trip on a response because you can't put it in easy, discernible categories. They might have low tolerance for like, well, your life must be depressing, Donna, you're a caregiver, or
Mhm.
your life must be great because you don't have the responsibility of caring for someone. Caregiver
Yeah.
realities are much more complicated, right?
Yes, complicated and often very ambivalent. I mean, you get extreme opposites colliding all the time, opposites of emotions and opposites of experience. You can have uh, a morning that you think, oh, that was just the worst experience, and I'm never going to be able to forget the pain of what happened this morning. Maybe it's a new something that happened that signals a new um, uh, level progression in the disease, or something else. But in the afternoon, there could be laughter, there could be love, there could be joy. The, the tears of despair in the morning turn to tears of laughter in the afternoon, and often black humor. I mean, that's the reality of those opposites colliding, and other people don't always get that at all.
And the people that we think would most get it can't, don't know how, or don't don't have the imagination or the capacity to do so.
Yeah.
Especially when we live in a very, most others are not hyper vigilant like caregivers, especially when you're caring for someone with MS or other chronic diseases in which um, not paying attention can mean the difference between suffering, and it can make a difference in the everyday quality of life for you and your loved one. And this kind of hyper awareness is something that isn't about us being more negative, Donna, is it? It's more about an awareness that is required of us as caregivers.
Absolutely. If we are constantly, it's natural to strive to be the best family caregiver that you can be. And you want to offer care, but also comfort, solace. You want to um, offer everything that you have to ease the path um, for the day, for the night of the person that you love. And so um, often, I think we all will recognize in each other the constant saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And that just is our refrain. And by the way, very few people ask us if we are
Yep.
okay. And if they did, I'm not sure we'd know how to answer that question anyway.
In large part because we realize that the people may be asking the question have such a low tolerance for the kinds of complexities and contradictions that we have,
Yeah.
especially when you may live in the midst of being reminded that despite how much you want, how much you care for your loved one, how much you talk about this so eloquently, Donna, that there, caregivers recognize there are limitations that are what our love and our care can provide. And that is scary to outsiders. That is scary to others.
Yeah, there's so much language around the battle of, disease. Oh, and you got this, you can beat this thing. And, it's not helpful, um, that language, because I think we all come to the point where we realize that the power of our love and the power of our will combined with love is not enough sometimes to prevent nature from happening. And some, disease is a natural process. So, but I think people who have not had experience with chronic disease or loving someone with, even just through an aging process, um, it, it- there's this false narrative that says, "Oh well, if you care enough, if you love them enough, you're going to fix them." And so this is difficult um, to live with that messaging day on day.
So while others have low tolerance, they don't understand our experiences, we begin to also develop a kind of low tolerance for people who don't understand what we're going through and don't understand or are not able to be willing to listen to the kinds of realities that shape us. And this is the challenge, is that there really is nothing perhaps more painful socially and more bewildering than feeling misunderstood by people you care about and whom believe you care about you. I mean, these are good people. These are family and friends that, prior to the deep experiences that you're having as a caregiver, would be the people you would go to first. And you would thought that they would be the ones that you would go to most frequently. But your life may be evolving in ways that they have tolerances that cannot conceive of. And this feeling misunderstood is like this kind of chair that was once a kind of a safe space in a home becomes kind of seen differently. They are still there, they are present, but it's these kinds of, and you can, this recognition that the perception of your support from others is so vital. It's not just the support people give, but do you feel connected? Do you feel understood? And when we don't feel understood, we are unaware, we're on notice, we're feeling under duress, feeling threatened by people closest to us, Donna.
Yeah, I think it's very hard for us when we think that they should know
Yeah.
what we're experiencing, but we don't have the language to describe it.
Yeah.
So this is something you and I, Zachary, talk a lot about. How can we help people locate the language to describe these very complex experiences?
Those expectations are the highest for those that we know the most and who we think and expect to know us the most and want to know what we're doing and how we're being changed by our caregiving experiences. And maybe someone here is locating themselves in these statements that, this is what we're thinking. And usually they're born out of disappointment about what is not happening. That's the very powerful thing about, you only can expect something of a loved one when you know that person. Like, you don't expect something from someone when you're walking down a street in New York City. These are people you don't know. But when you know a loved one is near you and you think they should be calling, what they're not doing, Donna, is as powerful or more damning or more hurtful than perhaps what they are doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
And so maybe you're finding yourself in one of these kind of statements that you might be telling yourself. This idea that it's almost disorienting, a term we use a lot in the book about the idea that you kind of, the world is turned upside down, and the people that you felt you were going to get so much support from now make you feel remarkably alone, remarkably different in ways that you could not have conceived of or could never have dreamed. And yet, this is the irony, Donna. Why is it that we, caregivers of all people, understand interdependence and the need for support, but oftentimes we find ourselves saying no to
Yeah.
to offers of support? It doesn't make sense, but why does that happen?
Oh, it's so funny. I've given a lot of thought over my life, and Zachary, I think you have too. We all have, about what kind of help is actually helpful to me now in my home. Because people come and say, "Oh, you know, um, let me come and visit you," and then they expect to be served tea and, "Don't you have some cookies?" And that is not helpful. So what is helpful for one person may not be at all for another person. So it becomes too complicated to negotiate um, these acts of care with people if they don't have a deep understanding of you and of your situation. Because if they offer something and you go, "No, can you think of something else?" And then somebody has hurt feelings, or they get upset or angry or whatever, that they've been rebuffed. I think often we just say, "Oh, we don't want to go there. Just don't want to go there."
It's too much emotional exhaustion at a time when we feel that we have little, if anything, to give to our loved one, let alone ourselves. And I think you've said it so wonderfully. And so there's some challenges that go with receiving support from friends and family. And we recognize this reality in ways that others do not, because of our experiences and the intensity and the long-standing nature of caregiving experiences. And so this is not to decry your family and friends, but it is rethinking where and how you might receive support. So let's first talk about maybe some challenges. First and foremost, similarity can be a liability. Um, our networks of family and friends prior to your caregiving experiences are often a reflection of kind of shared realities, commonalities. And yet this very commonality that brought us together with our family and friends also is a source of difference when our caregiving experiences reminds us that no matter how much they want it, my brother can't understand what I'm going through. He has no point of reference. And so that same similarity that my brother and I shared may not be one that bridges a divide here when I need him to understand the depth of what I'm dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Donna, as you're sharing something with a loved one, a sibling, a parent, a neighbor that you have a longstanding relationship, they can't separate you from what they know of you, right, Donna? Your history.
No, yeah, the history. And the scenario that comes to mind, Zachary, as you're just talking about these dynamics is, so if your spouse has MS and was diagnosed, I don't know, at a time in your life when you've got young children, and your next door neighbors were your best friends, and the kids were playing together, and all of a sudden introduced into this friendship is this dramatic difference, and you try to engage in the way that you used to, but it's very difficult to do, and it becomes for many people intolerable. I don't want to hear what you did, what you guys did, and you went to the park and you're planning another holiday, and I just don't want to hear that right now. And I think that's perfectly normal. So it's worth reflecting on, how do I feel that I have been otherness. I feel different from the person I used to be, and I feel different from everybody who were my peers. So I think we're called then, and we'll be talking about this in a minute, to find a new peer group who do understand.
Right. Not here trying to talk about how friends and families are incomplete, but they are insufficient in many ways,
Mm-hmm.
given our caregiving responsibilities. It's one of those ironies that the people who know us best want to change our stories, change the way we are experiencing something to make it more palatable, to make better endings, to make it to make it fit what their needs are, rather than really listening to us because it may be threatening to them. It may challenge their values. It may challenge what we believed and what we thought we believed together. These are challenges of sharing and receiving support from people who love us the most, Donna. I mean, people who love us the most or have a shared history, they're oftentimes more loyal to who we were or who they remember us to be. And it's hard, if not impossible, for them to see how we are changing, how my loved one is changing, how caregiving with my loved one with MS is changing us. Our relationship is changing. And
It's
having,
true.
if someone doesn't notice it or won't notice it, there's an inevitable barrier.
Yeah.
Goodness, we know this, and maybe some of you just emerged from Thanksgiving, if not in person, but over the phone or through Zoom. Relational stakes are always high because what we say will be remembered. And so what it does is it kind of we self-censor. We're accommodators as caregivers. I don't want to deal with it. I want to say this because I hate when they imply something about me and my loved one, but I don't want to because it will inevitably change my relationship with my parent or my sibling or my spouse.
The other thing about that relational stakes bit too, I think the other role that we play is that we broker the relationship for our loved one to the world. We, in terms of Thanksgiving, it took like 3 hours to get ready for that Zoom call. And everybody on that listening end has no clue of what went on before. And it's all very jolly, but because there is this no recognition of knowing your reality, and you don't want to say it either, right?
No.
Because that would feel like a betrayal of the person that you're caring for. But nevertheless, we're swirling around this idea of seeking understanding of ourselves and our current reality. And the reality in the case of MS is, of course, it's evolving.
Always evolving. And then we've evolved in our own ways of responding, and deeply layered, and can make us feel, as you say, oftentimes very lost and alone when surrounded by people who once made us feel comfortable and safe. And so it's one of those strange paradoxes that you can't explain to the people who make you feel alone and lost, not because they want to, but because of the changing circumstances. And so here's what we want you to think about today, is this idea of the benefits of expanding our care networks and reaching out beyond the existing networks so we can begin to see ourselves and our experiences in ways that we may not have fully appreciated nor allowed ourselves to contemplate. And so it's when we're most vulnerable, Donna, it does ask us and require of us, especially in a chronic ongoing situation, to seek out those who can best understand our circumstances, not necessarily because their circumstances are the same, but because their tolerance for understanding and creating understanding is very different from our family and friends at times.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that this kind of shift requires an acceptance on some level that people you love may not be able to give you what you need going through this experience. So reaching out beyond existing networks and finding people who have an automatic understanding of what you're talking about and what you are living every day without having to struggle to explain it. Sometimes, there's just the look. And all you have to say is, we missed the transfer from the bed to the chair today. And, my husband, my son, my brother that I care for landed on the floor. And another caregiver, you don't have to say anything other than that. You just go, okay, let's talk. And so that level of deep
Mhm.
understanding with not too much vocabulary, not too much work.
Yeah, understanding
That's a
doesn't
gift,
require words. I mean, that is that shared assumption
right?
without the burden of proof of explanation is
Mhm.
remarkably powerful, as you're saying.
Yeah.
So just some benefits and just to put them here so that we can take them in at once. Um, they are kind of some benefits you may not be able to glean from your existing family and friend network. Not because that network is bad or deficient, but it is insufficient. As Donna said, finding similarity in what is not doesn't have to be stated. Voicing unedited truths in your own time and in your own way. Unedited to the extent that you can share that story, Donna, of what went wrong. Because if you're sharing that with friends and family, they might think, oh my God, you're not a good caregiver. You're not a
Yeah.
good person. You really don't love your spouse, Donna.
Hmm.
People who are immersed in the caregiving experience realize that the world doesn't go as we think it does, and it's not packaged in these ways that are kind of sanitary,
Oh,
for others to
stuff
understand.
happens
Yeah.
in the thick of it. Oh, yeah.
How many times have you found yourself at the grocery store or otherwise, pre-pandemic perhaps, um, having to adjust yourself to what others' tolerances are? How much or how little detail. We know from countless interviews with caregivers, just like many of you tonight, it's that, we understand, you understand that look in someone's eye when they go, oh my God, you're telling me too much. Or that look of aghast, like, oh, I cannot believe they have to deal with that. Or the backing away they, do unknowingly when they think that you're sharing too much of your life. Don't want to hear that much. Just ask how you are. Don't tell me. So that accommodation becomes a habit, unfortunately. And we learn, unfortunately, to keep those things silent. Donna, one of the most powerful things about expanding our network is leveraging more accurate caregiver comparisons so we can not think that we have to be superhuman. Others tell us we are saints. We know we are caring for someone we love, but we don't see ourselves as saints. And what other benchmarks do we have but other caregivers who can laugh with us, give us tips, give us some feedback, and help us know that we need not be perfect.
Yeah. Another thing that you once said, Zachary, that I loved so much um, was that, family caregivers are often like, what did you say? The inventor in the garage, it's
Yeah.
almost a Steve Jobs of like, we're constantly problem solving, inventing solutions to problems that pop up every day. And the amount of creativity and knowledge and available support and kindness and generosity in the caregiving community is like fantastic.
That kind of grace of knowing that you too have been there or you too have struggled with that. And that's part of the experience, not part of you. And that's what
Right.
others, family and friends cannot give us because Donna is failing or Donna is really beyond her capacity. Donna's temper is a little bit different than it used to be, rather than, oh yeah, you're having one of those days. I mean, those are small differences that make profound impact over time.
Mhm.
In large part because, it's hard for us to believe people for whom tell us about our experiences versus listening to people who are immersed in their own care experiences. And that's part of why we listen to caregivers, is that they provide not only probably better insight, but also more objective feedback. They're not vested in you and your loved one. They can see your situation and help you reflect on it in ways that others may not be able to.
Yeah. And other caregivers won't be nervous if you cry.
It's like, finally, like, yes, of course, yes. You're amongst,
Naturally, that's the
yes,
correct response sometimes,
right.
boy. Yeah.
Caregivers are walking in multiple worlds, and oftentimes we have to defer to the world that sees, crying as some kind of failure or a doubt as some kind of
Yeah.
act of shame, rather than the
Yeah.
way like that's just not part of our landscape. Just you don't judge the landscape of where you are. You accept it because you have to work in it. Whereas
Mhm.
others look for beauty, and if it's not beauty, then they try to change the scenery. We live in a scenery.
Yeah, and if we see beauty, often other people wouldn't think of it as beauty.
Yep.
So, and success, same thing. We would have a great day, and then you'd try to explain why the day was so great. And, these are small things that make a huge difference to our families. And it is hard for other people to understand. But yeah. Um, I think we need, I think it's not that um, I think what we're talking about here is just trying to be a little bit intentional about curating your social relationships so they're less burdensome and more helpful. Because sometimes it just can be too exhausting. You are now a square peg and you are trying to fit into the round hole that your life was before your diagnosis. And that's just way too tiring.
It is not, underscore not, a betrayal of your own family and friends. It's an expansion.
Yeah.
And, this is a quote that you and I oftentimes go to. And I'll let you lead here, Donna, in terms of explaining this curation that you're talking about.
Yeah. So, something we talk a lot about is um, how do you make the best life that you possibly can, given the givens of your health challenges in your family? And one of the ways that you can start to figure that out is by taking a bit of a tally or um, an audit of what you do have. And and I mean, even in circumstances of adversity, I'm not talking about, you don't need to be rich to do this. It's just looking around and saying, what have I got here that I can do something with? So this quote by John McKnight is John's the one of the founders of the asset-based community development movement. He's a old Chicago um, community organizer, and he's like in his late 80s now. But he started this movement of understanding that even in adversity, um, there are everyone has gifts, everyone has talents, everyone can make a contribution. And let's find out what is good and useful in this set of circumstances where other people might look at you, your family, your circumstances, and just see a sinkhole of need. Well, guess what? Of course we have needs, but we also have uh, we also have um, elements that we can work with to build a good life here that we value. So this is just a little drawing that I did for my own family when I was looking for um, help. And my thing was to think of 3 things I needed help with. Where could I get them in my community? So um, I'm suggesting that you think of 3 things you need, and then make literally a column on the right hand side of the paper of where could I possibly have those needs met. So I was just doing a bit of brainstorming here. You'll see I wrote provincial government for more home care, personal support. This was when I was needing help with my mom. I'm in Canada, that's why I wrote that. But Casey here from the foundation, and I were talking before we began tonight, and I said, is the foundation somewhere people can go if they need help, if they need respite? And yes, it is. And you can get in touch with Casey to ask for what those supports might look like, including even neurologist, doctor home visits, eye care, dental care, and respite, all sorts of care. it's worth information gathering to the people who are interested in trying to be helpful. And Casey is one of those people. So, but of course, yeah, disease association, insurance company. And also I wrote caregiver online support group, because even if everybody says no to me, maybe somebody else who is in similar situation did succeed in finding a source of help. So ask in the caregiver community, did anyone get what I need? How did you get it? Can you introduce me to someone who might be helpful? So that's just a quick example of matching needs with possible resources. Zachary, you and I talk a lot about that caring is just overwhelming when we're trying to do everything all by ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that comes with a lot of guilt too. And Zachary, maybe you can talk about this idea, why it's so harmful that we think we need to be everything and do everything all by ourselves with no help. And if we don't, something bad.
Right. The mantra that seemingly works and as you get rewarded for and honored for throughout your life becomes counterproductive, overwhelming, and you find yourself lost and drowning in this idea that you and you alone are responsible for your loved one and all that goes on behind and in front of the scenes of caregiving. First off, we know that's an impossible standard. And it also prevents you from recognizing that you are a team manager as much as you are a caregiver alone.
Yeah, that's right. So instead, I want to propose this idea of a network model of care. Now, we've just been talking about how lots of other people in your friends and family might say, whoa, I don't know, I could never do what you do, or say something like my mother-in-law said to me once when our son was coming home from hospital. He has very severe disabilities. And she said, now, if there's anything I can do, but I'm sure there's nothing I can do. And I said to her, I don't know why I said this, but I did. I said, oh, Jean, her name was Jean. I said, Jean, could you make a banana bread for us? And she said, I would love to make a banana bread. I would love it. This is what I'm good at, she said. And I said, I know, I love your banana bread. Anyway, I learned from that, it's very important to think about people as wanting to be helpful, but not knowing how, not understanding what they could possibly do that might be actually helpful and not intrusive, what they could do to help that isn't going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is what we call a clean transaction of care. They might somehow get sucked into some murky world. Well, aren't you coming every day type thing? And we know, of course, that it's not, of course, we're not going to expect somebody to come every day, but we don't really know how to project manage people to take small bits of what they're naturally good at. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and this idea of coordinating that network of care. So an idea that I want to propose is something that's based on the WHO International Classification of Function. And this is the World Health Organization's way of thinking about health and well-being and these domains of what we all need to be healthy. So next slide. I want to, because we need a framework. We need somewhere to begin how to think about what kind of help will be helpful for us. Who are we going to ask to do one thing in my list of, wants or needs? Well, the F words is a good template to think about, particularly during COVID, because during COVID, we were really limited in day programs, in going out to work, anything that we used to do in terms of well-being for our loved one and for ourselves and other members of our family we may be caring for. That's all changed. And all of a sudden, the world has gotten to be really tiny with way fewer possibilities. So this is called the F words. And the F words are function, family, fitness, fun, friends, and future. And this is based on the International World Health Organization classification of function that I just showed you. So it's legit. It comes from the world of childhood disability. And if you want to know more about it or download tools and templates to fill in your own F words template, you can go to www.canchild.ca, and all the tools for the F words are there, free and downloadable. But what you do with this is you sit and you say, you can fill this template with photos or words, whatever you want, and you can use it with every single member of your family. So the other great thing about this is that, with a progressive disease, the function is going to look different now than it is 2 years from now. So what do I want to do if I have MS and I want to, how do I think about my own function and what do I want to do? What do I want to do in my family? What do I want to do for fitness? How do I want to have fun? How do I want to be with friends? And so you can put your goals and objectives there, and everybody gets to do it. And then you can put them all on the table and say, how are we all going to get what we want for function, family, fitness, and all the F words? So it's a way of thinking about what a good life looks like. And then you can begin to think, how am I going to get it? So the next step is to think about all of the people who have ever offered help, and a list of professionals who you need in your life. List their skills, talents, and preferences, and identify appropriate tasks for each of them. You can even start by just 3 people. It just doesn't have to be a big exercise. But, if you're in a family who has, you have a sister who says, now, if there's anything I can do, and you always have said, oh, that's okay, I don't need any help. I think this is an opportunity to sit down with the F words and begin to create a system of support. So, Zachary, tell me, did you have somebody in your life when you were caring for your mom who you were able to actually ask for help and they gave you help?
No, because I wasn't, I didn't think about it this way. And I didn't have the skills that you're highlighting in terms of really thinking about people in that way. I saw them as they once were, not as this as a kind of, it requires a kind of seeing them anew, rather than seeing them as, a loved one who's not calling, or is telling me how to do things from afar. And so this would have been so valuable and so essential.
Well, I can only imagine that my mother-in-law, when she said what she said, which I'm sure there's nothing I can do, I think she thought if she actually would offer help, I would ask her to change a surgical dressing or something.
Right.
And when I said a banana bread, like, she was so happy, so relieved. And I only said it by accident, but if I had used this approach, I would have remembered, gosh, you know what? She's a really good cook. We could really use food. Who couldn't use food all the time, right? Delivered to your doorstep. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we used to leave a cooler on the front doorstep when times were bad and hope that people would put something in it for us, and they did sometimes. But I think if I had an easier time of asking for help is very hard. So that's why this approach is asking people only to do one small thing that they're already good at or they already like. That's the thing. So can we see the next slide? So an example of this. It's easier to start, in order to figure this out, sit and put two, 3, or 4 bullet points to describe someone who has ever offered help for your family. And this isn't necessarily related to care. It could be related to looking after your older mother, or because everybody has a ton of responsibilities on their plate, not just looking after the person you love who has MS, right? So this is about your whole life. So my sister Susan, this is a hypothetical, not my real sister. She's good at or likes money management, tidying up, meaning a bit like OCD. She's comes in and changes all the dishes in my dishwasher so they line up, right? Or she loves to shop. She's a shopaholic and she's a nonstop talker. So thinking about what she likes or what she's good at, let's think about now some things that I might ask her to do. So that would be there. So Susan could help with bill payments and tax preparation. She's already good at that. She could help me organize files, because when I'm caring for someone, I got paperwork covering the dining room table and it's not organized and I need help with that. There are people who love to do that, and Susan could be one of them. She could be, because she loves to shop, she could be responsible for my mom's clothes shopping. She is the fashion director and she's also the shopper, and she will, Susan, would you mind returning the things that mom doesn't like as well? So she just got full command of the clothing. Because she's a chatterbox, she could be the communicator of mom's health updates. So you see where I'm going? Like, you look at somebody, their personality, what they do anyway, and you think, what would they like to do that would be helpful for me, that would show them in their best possible light and would be really helpful for our family. And it's also really important when you have this conversation with somebody to say, this is what I was thinking you might like to do, because these are things you're good at, but maybe you've got your own ideas.
Hey, Donna, we got about 3
yeah.
minutes before we take a few questions if they have any. So just to.
Okay. So there's my brother-in-law, Brian, can look at some of his things he likes, and those are all the things that he could do. So the other thing is, if you don't want to ask anybody anything. You can get somebody else to ask. You can either pay them to be that person to coordinate your network of support and do all the asking for you, or you could get an unpaid person to say, I will be the coordinator of your network. Give me your list of friends and family. I'll figure out what they want to do, and I'll slot them in the calendar. So speaking of calendars, these are online care coordination websites, and CareZone, lots of helping hands, Google Calendar, Alska. Alska is the only one that you have to pay for here. It's a subscription, but all the others are free. And if you want to hire a caregiving consultant, you can do that at caregiving.com/meet. And they're listed there, and you can hire them off the internet. The others, you can just start your own website for coordinating your network of care, and it's free. If you want to do that, oh, and this is just, don't forget your own emotional needs. Make sure that you have a friend outside and include them in your network. This is only my friend for laughing my head off with, or, going for walks.
And those, Donna, might oftentimes be found in care support groups and others in which you're accessing those very specific kinds of commonalities, and a burgeoning friendship can form from that one commonality.
Oh, absolutely. So if as soon as you get a few people who said, sure, I'll help, this is what I'll do, begin then with an actual online shared calendar, either a Google Calendar or the calendar feature in any one of those care coordination websites that I indicated, and begin to slot them in. It's very important that it's a shared calendar so everybody can see what each other's doing and what you're doing in your family. So if there's a medical appointment, they'll know not to come that day. So yeah, this is, just how do you make a healthy network, one that's going to sustain over time? You thank people and you meet with people, have celebrations, even Zoom celebrations. With our son's network, for example, we have quiz nights on Zoom, and everybody's got a beer in their hand and we've got quiz questions, and that way we all, together with my son in the middle, we can all bond, and that's good for the network.
And as we wrap it up here,
Yeah.
What is the idea of challenges and wins is really important, isn't it, Donna?
Well, it is, because we all have both. We all have both in life, whether we're caring for someone with muscular sclerosis or multiple sclerosis or not. We all have challenges and we all have wins, and those change over time as the disease progresses. It's going to look very, very different.
Because our values are evolving in the midst of that care experience, and what is important to us needs to be shared for that reciprocity of understanding. Because once we get understanding for what we're going through, we can share those moments of triumph or joy or peace, in addition to the other challenges that may be going on simultaneously, and both may exist at the same time. We have, I think, a couple minutes here for if you have any comments or questions that you want to pose in the chat. We want to respect your time, as it is remarkably valuable on a Monday night, as it is every night. And there are no holidays amidst the care experience in so many different ways. And if you do have a question, feel free to pose it in the chat. As we're doing that, you can also go ahead, Donna.
Oh, I just wondered whether or not anyone was already using an online tool to coordinate the care of friends and family helping. Is anybody using something like a Google Calendar or Lots of Helping Hands or Caring Bridge or any of those Or are you just kind of trying to figure it out on a call by call basis? If you have thoughts about that, just pop them in the chat box.
And if you would like to follow up with Donna and kind of glean her ongoing wisdom from her blog, The Caregiver's Living Room, you can also check out my blog, The Unprepared Caregiver. Our voices are speaking to and about the care experience, an experience that we know is oftentimes marginalized, omitted, forgotten, neglected, and it needs to be celebrated, valorized, and honored, Donna, as we often talk about. It's a role, it's a life role without feedback. It's a life role without honors and awards. There is no graduation from caregiving. It's a role that shapes who you are in so many ways. We may not have chosen to be a caregiver, but we have chosen to be in a relationship with someone, and that relationship has transformed itself in ways we could never have expected. And we appreciate and value what you do and who you're becoming in the midst of this process. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us.
You can contact us through our respective websites, and a lot of the ideas, well, all of the ideas that we talked about this evening are in our book, The Unexpected Journey of Caring, the Transformation from Loved One to Caregiver. And there are a lot of tools and templates that you can actually just use your pen and fill out to help you be intentional and figure out how to live well amidst circumstances of adversity and challenge. So I think we all know, when a good day is really good, we want more good days. We just really do.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Casey and MS Focus, for making this possible for us to spend a few minutes tonight with MS caregivers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, it is the end of our time this evening. I just want to give a few housekeeping notes. If you missed any part of this conference, it will be replayed on msfocusradio.org and available on demand on our MS Focus SoundCloud page or on our YouTube page. Remember to follow MS Focus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for times and access information. Our next teleconference will be Movement as Medicine. That'll be December 3rd at 4:30 p.m. with exercise specialist Marina Moldavsky. So our sincere thanks to all of our attendees for joining us tonight, and especially to you, Dr. Zachary White and Donna Thomson. Thank you so much for the obvious thought and preparation that went into your presentation and sharing this really important information and perspective with us. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.